The handcuffs were silver. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the flashing blue lights reflecting off the neighbors' windows, or the way Mrs. Gable next door was peering through her blinds with hungry eyes. I focused on the metal cuffs clicking shut around Vivian's wrists. She wasn't screaming. She was hyperventilating small gasps of air that sounded like a drowning bird. She looked at me standing on the porch in my pajamas, her eyes wide with a question I had already answered months ago. Graham was sitting on the curb, his head in his hands, weeping. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I felt like I had just finished a marathon running on broken ankles. Exhausted, hollow, clean. 4 months earlier, the only thing buried was my father. The August heat in Ohio was a physical weight pressing down on the back of my neck. It was the kind of humidity that made your clothes stick to your skin the moment you stepped outside. I was kneeling in the dirt at Forest Lawn Cemetery, my heels sinking slightly into the soft ground, section 14, row 7. I had memorized the coordinates like a passcode. My father's headstone was simple gray granite. Howard Lin Chen. The characters beneath his English name looked sharp, freshly cut against the stone. I reached out and brushed a stray blade of grass from the base. There weren't any weeds. I came every Saturday, but my hands needed something to do. "I met with your lawyer this week," I said to the granite. My voice sounded thin in the open air. "June, I think you would have liked that she serves tea in the office." A lawnmower droned in the distance, a low buzzing fly in the summer heat. "She told me about the trust, Dad. $3.2 million. I paused, waiting for him to explain himself, to tell me why he lived in a 2-bedroom ranch house and drove a 10-year-old Toyota if he had millions sitting in investment accounts. "She said you spent a year designing it. 7 trigger clauses, like you were preparing for a siege." I touched the jade pendant at my throat. It was cool against my sweaty skin. My mother had given it to me when I was 16, 2 years before the accident that took her. This stone shows what is real, Nora. Green fades when you are sick, brightens when you are well. I didn't believe in superstition. I was an accountant. I believed in ledgers, in credits, and debits, in things that could be balanced. But I never took it off. "I don't know who you thought I needed protection from," I whispered. "I'm 38 years old. I'm a senior forensic accountant. I can handle myself." My phone buzzed in my purse. A sharp mechanical insect sound. I pulled it out. A text from Graham. "Mom's asking if you're coming to dinner tonight." I said yes. That okay. I looked at the screen. Then I looked at the empty patch of grass beside my father's grave. The fog of grief I had been living in for 3 weeks didn't lift, but it shifted. It changed from a passive gray mist into something heavier. Obligation. Vivian. 3 weeks of casseroles sent over with instructions on how to reheat them. 3 weeks of, "How are you managing the estate, dear?" slipped into conversations about the weather. 3 weeks of feeling like a specimen under a microscope. "You designed something, didn't you?" I asked the headstone. "A puzzle I'm supposed to solve." I stood up, brushing the dirt from my knees. I squared my shoulders. I typed back, "I'll be there." Vivian's house always smelled like roast beef and expensive potpourri, a cloying floral scent that caught in the back of your throat. The air conditioning was set to 68 degrees, cold enough to preserve meat, or in Vivian's case, cut flowers. We were in the formal dining room. We were always in the formal dining room. The table was set with the good china, the stuff with the gold rim that you couldn't put in the dishwasher. There were too many forks. Vivian had learned table settings from a book in the 80s and treated it like religious doctrine. I sat between my sister-in-law Paige and my husband. Graham had his hand on the small of my back. It should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt like he was checking to make sure I was still there. "Nora, sweetheart, you look..." Vivian paused, holding a crystal wine glass midair. She tilted her head, her highlighted blonde hair not moving an inch. "Tired. Are you sleeping?" "I'm fine, Vivian," I said. "Work is busy." "Work." She said the word like it was a vulgarity. "I would think with everything you have to manage now, you might take some time off. The estate must be overwhelming." June is handling the legal side, I said, unfolding my napkin. It's a trust. It's fairly automated. June Yamamoto. Vivian took a sip of her wine. I've heard she's aggressive, very thorough. Mom, don't pry, Paige said. She was picking at her salad, pushing a cherry tomato around the plate. I am not prying, Vivian said, her smile tightening at the corners. I am concerned. Nora has no family left. We are her family now. We worry. Len, my father-in-law, cleared his throat at the end of the table. Pass the salt. It was the first thing he had said since I arrived. Vivian reached across the table and patted my hand. Her fingers were cold, her grip surprisingly firm. Family should share each other's burdens, don't you think? That is what family does. We share the load. I didn't pull my hand away. I let it sit there under hers, limp and unresisting. I was the gray rock. That was how I survived childhood, and it was how I survived Vivian. Be boring. Be unreactive. Give them nothing to latch onto. I was thinking, Vivian continued, her voice dropping into that confidential register she used when she was selling a house with a wet basement. You shouldn't have to deal with all those decisions alone. Graham could help, maybe review the documents with you. He has such a good head for business. I appreciate that, I said evenly. But there's really nothing to review. As I said, it's self-executing. Self-executing, Vivian repeated. How efficient. Can we just eat? Graham asked. He sounded tired. Mom, the roast is getting cold. I am trying to help Graham. Vivian snapped the mask, slipping for a millisecond before sliding back into place. Some of us care about more than just our stomachs. The soup was served. Cream of mushroom. We ate in silence, the only sound the click of silver spoons against china. I watched Vivian from the corner of my eye. She was watching me, not with warmth, with calculation. She was looking for a crack. You know, Paige said suddenly, her voice bright and artificial. I read an article the other day about trusts. It said they can be complicated, like sometimes people contest them if they aren't fair to the family. I turned to look at Paige. She was staring intently at her water glass. Paige didn't read articles about trust law. Paige read interior design blogs and sent me links to throw pillows that cost $300. Who would contest it, Paige? I asked. Oh, no one, she laughed, a nervous, brittle sound. I'm just saying, legally speaking, hypothetically. I'll keep that in mind, I said. Graham shifted in his chair beside me. He didn't look at me. He reached for the bread basket. I should have paid attention to his silence. I didn't. I was too busy watching Vivian and Paige, thinking they were the only players on the board. Well, Vivian clapped her hands together. Who is ready for dessert? I made your favorite Graham, peach cobbler. The tension broke, dissolving into the mundane chatter of passing plates and pouring coffee. But the air in the room had changed. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was research. They weren't just asking questions. They were testing the perimeter fence. The drive home was silent. Graham turned on sports radio, the volume just loud enough to discourage conversation. It was his favorite avoidance technique. If the Buckeyes were talking, he didn't have to. When we got into our kitchen, the silence followed us. Our house was a modest ranch, nothing like Vivian's sprawling colonial. It was comfortable lived in. Usually this was my sanctuary. Tonight, it felt like an extension of the battlefield. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. Your mother asked a lot of questions tonight. Graham opened the refrigerator and took out a beer. She's just concerned, Nora. You know how she is. She mentioned the trust 5 times, Graham. So it's a big deal. $3 million is a lot of money. She just wants to make sure you're okay. She asked if I'd let you review the documents. He popped the tab on the beer can. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet kitchen. Would that be so bad? He asked, not turning around. I am your husband. The trust has nothing to do with our marriage. He turned then. His face wasn't angry exactly. It was frustrated. A petulant, low-simmering frustration I hadn't seen often. What is that supposed to mean? It means my father left that money to me. Not to us, not to your family, to me. We're a team, Nora, he said. Or I thought we were. We are a team, but that money is separate. It's my father's legacy. After everything Mom has done for us, he let the sentence trail off, taking a long drink of beer. I stared at him. What has your mother done for us, Graham? He stumbled, caught off guard. Well, we have dinner there every week. She helped plan the wedding. The wedding she tried to take over, I asked. The seating chart she changed 3 times without telling me. The one where she wore cream lace. You're being unfair, he said. You're always so hard on her. Maybe, I said. My voice was quiet. I felt a deep, profound exhaustion settling into my bones. I'm going to bed. Nora, I stopped at the doorway. I didn't turn back. I need you to hear something, Graham. That trust isn't a family slush fund. My father didn't design it to be distributed based on what your mother thinks is fair. I walked out. I heard him sigh, heard the refrigerator door open again. He was getting another beer. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, waiting for him to come up. He didn't. I fell into a restless sleep, dreaming of gray stones and cold hands. I woke up because the house was too quiet. The digital clock on the nightstand read 11:47 p.m. The space beside me in bed was empty. I needed water. I padded barefoot across the carpet, moving silently. I was always quiet. It was a habit from growing up in a house where my father needed absolute silence to work in the evenings. I saw the light under the bathroom door at the end of the hall. The fan was off. Then I heard the voice. Graham's voice. Low, urgent. The trust, Mom. I'm working on it. I froze. My hand hovered over the wall, inches from the hallway paint. I shouldn't listen. A good wife wouldn't listen. A trusting wife would walk back to bed. I took a step closer. She won't show me the documents, Graham said. I tried asking tonight. She shut me down. She's suspicious. There was a pause. I could hear the tiny murmur of Vivian's voice on the other end, but I couldn't make out the words. I know, Graham said. He sounded defensive. I know it should be shared. Yes, I think I can get her email password. She uses the same one for the Wi-Fi. It's probably that. Ice. Absolute zero spreading from the center of my chest out to my fingertips. My husband was discussing stealing my password with his mother. Paige can help, he whispered. She's good at that tech stuff. What no, Mom? Nora won't notice. She's buried in work. She's staring at spreadsheets all day. She's not looking at us. Another pause. Mom, I know, Graham said, his voice dropping even lower. I know I owe you. I haven't forgotten about the business loan. I'll get this done. Just give me time. I backed away. 1 step, 2 steps. I turned and walked back to the bedroom. I moved like a ghost. I got into bed and pulled the duvet up to my chin. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my hands were steady. He owed her money. A business loan. He wasn't just a mama's boy. He was a debtor, and I was the repayment plan. 20 minutes later, the bathroom door opened. Graham walked into the bedroom. The mattress dipped as he climbed in beside me. You awake? He whispered. I lay perfectly still. I forced my breathing to be slow, rhythmic. Nora. Just fell asleep, I murmured. My voice sounded groggy. It was the best performance of my life. Okay, he said. Night. He turned onto his side, facing away from me. Within 5 minutes, his breathing deepened into the heavy rhythm of sleep. I lay there in the dark, eyes wide open. I could scream. I could shake him awake and demand answers. I could pack a bag and leave right now. But I was Howard Chen's daughter, and I was a forensic accountant. You didn't blow up the crime scene before you had collected the evidence. You didn't tip off the suspect that you were watching. You observed. You documented. You waited until the trap was inescapable. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. I turned the brightness all the way down. I opened the Notes app. August 27th, 11:47 p.m. Graham on phone with Vivian. Discuss trust. Access, password theft. Page involvement, business loan owed. I saved the note. I put the phone back. I looked at the back of my husband's head. I looked at the curve of his shoulder, the place I had rested my cheek 1,000 times. Dad, I thought, closing my eyes. Whatever you designed, I think I'm going to need it. I didn't sleep. I just waited for the sun to rise on a world that had completely changed. The fluorescent lights of the Deloitte office hummed with a frequency that usually faded into the background, but today it sounded like a dental drill. My desk was a fortress of dual monitors and stacked ledgers, a barricade I had built against the chaos of my personal life. I had checked my email 12 times in the last hour. I wasn't waiting for a client response. I was waiting for a notification that didn't exist, a phantom alert that my husband was currently logging into my bank account. Coffee sat, cold and untouched, beside my keyboard. I stared at a spreadsheet detailing a supply chain discrepancy for a manufacturing client in Cleveland. But the numbers kept swimming, rearranging themselves into dates. August 27th, 11:47 at night. The time stamp of betrayal. You are going to wear a hole in that refresh button. I didn't jump. Willa Connors had the ability to appear at my cubicle wall without displacing any air. She was leaning against the partition, holding a green smoothie that looked like pond water. She raised an eyebrow. "Who are you waiting to hear from?" she asked. "The FBI. Just expecting something," I said. My voice sounded normal. That was the terrifying part. I was learning that I was an excellent liar. Willa perched on the edge of my desk, ignoring the stack of files. "Uh-huh. Spill. You have been staring at the same cell for 20 minutes. Is it the in-laws?" I looked at her. Willa was the best forensic data analyst in the department. She could find a deleted invoice in a server crash from 3 years ago. She was also my friend, which meant she was dangerous. "Hypothetically," I said, turning my chair slightly. I love hypotheticals. If someone thought their spouse was accessing their accounts, I chose my words with the precision of a surgeon, without permission. How would they prove that? Willa stopped drinking her smoothie. The playful glint in her eyes vanished, replaced by the sharp, predatory look she got when she found a discrepancy in a ledger. "Hypothetically, strictly. Email forwarding logs," she said instantly. "Login metadata, device IDs. People think deleting an email makes it go away. It doesn't. Gmail, Outlook. They all keep access logs. If someone logs in from a new device, it is stamped. If they set up an auto-forward rule, so they can see your messages without you knowing, there is a record of when that rule was created. Even if they deleted the rule later, everything leaves a trail, Nora. You know this. It is literally our job." She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Corporate IT can pull logs going back years. Personal accounts are harder, but if you have access to the account, you can pull the security activity yourself." She paused, looking at my hands. I was gripping my mouse so hard my knuckles were white. "This isn't hypothetical, is it?" I forced my fingers to relax. "I don't know yet." Willa looked at me for a long moment. She didn't ask who. She didn't offer a platitude. She just nodded, a soldier recognizing another soldier in the trenches. "Well," she said, sliding off the desk, "when you know I know how to pull records. Ethically adjacent, of course." She winked, but there was no humor in it. "Just say the word." I watched her walk back to her office. I had a choice. I could let it go. I could pretend the phone call I overheard was a misunderstanding, a bad dream brought on by grief. I could go back to being the wife who cooked dinner and made peace, or I could investigate. I turned back to my screens. I opened a new browser window. I didn't log into the client portal. I logged into my own life. June. Yamamoto's office was the antithesis of the corporate sterility I worked in. It smelled of old paper and jasmine tea. The walls were lined with dark wood bookshelves, packed with legal volumes that looked like they had actually been read. A framed photo of an older Japanese woman sat on her desk, watching us with stern kindness. June poured tea from a ceramic pot. She did it slowly, deliberately, as if the act of pouring was as important as the legal advice she was about to give. Your father spent 14 months designing this trust, June said, placing a cup in front of me. Not the money management. That part is straightforward, the protection clauses. He mentioned something about trigger clauses, I said. I held the warm cup, letting the heat seep into my cold fingers. To the headstone, I mean. I told him he was paranoid. June smiled a small, sad expression. He wasn't paranoid. He was prepared. There are 7 of them. Each one is designed for a specific scenario. She opened a leather-bound folder. The paper inside was thick, creamy, expensive. Clause 1. She read her finger tracing the line. Attempted access by a non-beneficiary to trust documents or accounts without express written consent. Clause 2. Legal challenge by a non-beneficiary to the validity of the trust. He expected someone to try something, I said. He knew someone would. He didn't know who or when, but he was certain. June took a sip of her tea. May I tell you something, Nora, personal, not professional? I nodded. When my mother died, my brother took everything. The house, the savings, her jewelry. I was the executor technically, but I was also grieving. I was 26, I didn't document. I didn't protect myself. I thought family meant we were on the same side. She set the cup down. The china made a soft clink against the saucer. Your father knew that story. We met at an estate planning seminar years ago. He told me, I won't let that happen to Nora. My throat felt tight. Has anyone asked you about the Trust family? June asked. My in-laws have expressed interest. Interest. Questions. I corrected myself. About what I'm going to do with it. About fairness to the family. Vivian talks about sharing burdens. Of course she does. June leaned forward. Nora, I need you to document everything. Every question. Every suggestion. Every subtle pressure. I already am. June looked surprised, then satisfied. Of course you are. You are Howard's daughter. June, I asked the question heavy on my tongue. What happens if someone tries to forge something if they try to access the trust fraudulently? June turned the page. Clause 4. What does it do? It is the nuclear option, June said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were hard. Attempted forgery or fraudulent documentation triggers an immediate and permanent exclusion of any individual involved in the attempt. The trust converts to charitable distribution specifically to an organization of your choosing. The family gets nothing. Not a penny, ever. So if someone forged my signature, they would never see a cent, and neither would anyone who helped them, or anyone who knew about it and failed to report it. I stared at the document. It wasn't just protection. It was a trap. My father hadn't just built a wall. He had buried landmines around the perimeter. Whoever tried to steal from me wouldn't just fail. They would destroy themselves. Your father loved you very much, June said softly. He spent his last months making sure you would be safe. Even from people I married, June looked me dead in the eye. Especially from people you married. I touched the jade pendant at my neck. I looked out the window at the Columbus skyline, gray and steady under the autumn clouds. I think I understand now, I said. The house was quiet, in a way that felt heavy. Graham was in Chicago for a sales conference. He had kissed me goodbye that morning, told me he would miss me, told me to make sure I ate something other than takeout. It was a performance. I knew that now. I sat in the small room off the hallway that we called the office. It was mostly my space filled with my reference books and tax code updates. The only light came from the glow of my laptop screen. A glass of wine sat untouched on a coaster. I wasn't drinking. I needed to be sharp. I opened a private browsing window. I typed in the URL for Gmail. Then I typed in Graham's username. I hesitated at the password field. He used the same password for everything. Buckeyes 1984. I knew it because I was the one who set up our router. I was the one who troubleshot his iPad when it wouldn't sync. I was the administrator of our digital life because Graham couldn't be bothered with details. I typed it in. Buckeyes 1984. The screen loaded. His inbox appeared. It felt like a violation. My heart was hammering against my ribs again, that same bird trying to escape. But then I remembered his voice through the bathroom door. I can get her email password. He had declared war first. I was just entering the battlefield. I didn't look at the recent emails. I went to the search bar. I typed Vivian. The results populated, hundreds of them. Most were mundane Sunday dinner plans, birthday reminders, family gossip. I sorted by date. I scrolled back. And then I stopped. Subject, RERE planning. The thread started 3 months ago. I clicked on it. From Vivian and date June 3rd, I heard Howard is not doing well. We should prepare. Once he passes, things will move quickly. June 3rd. My father was still alive. He had just received the terminal diagnosis, but he was still sitting up, still drinking tea, still telling me jokes. And while I was holding his hand, Vivian was emailing my husband about preparing for the payout. I read the next one. From Graham date, June 4th, I can get her to add me to the accounts. She trusts me. It won't be hard. She trusts me. I stared at the words until they blurred. He wasn't reluctant. He wasn't being pressured. He was volunteering. I scrolled down. From page date July 12th. I can forge signatures if we need emergency access. I have been practicing. It is just muscle memory. From Vivian date July 12th. Good girl. Just like the Hendricks deal. The Hendricks deal. I paused. I didn't recognize the name. Was it a business deal, a real estate transaction? I opened a new tab and typed Hendricks deal Vivian Keller into Google. Nothing. I tried Vivian Keller lawsuit. Nothing. I went back to the emails. From Graham date July 12th. What is the Hendricks deal? From Vivian date July 12th. Before your time. Ask your father. I pulled a sticky note from my desk and wrote Hendricks. Ask father, followed by a question mark. I kept reading. The thread evolved from speculation to concrete planning. They discussed a family agreement. They discussed pressuring me. They discussed finding a notary who wouldn't ask questions. From page date August 20th, found a guy, James Wexler. He will notarize anything for $500 cash. No questions asked. $500. That was the price tag on my marriage. That was the value of my trust, my father's legacy, my life. $500 cash to a corrupt notary in a strip mall. From Vivian date, August 21st. Perfect. Once Nora signs the family agreement, we can access the trust directly. We just need to get her to the table. From Graham date, August 21st. She doesn't suspect anything. She is too focused on work. She is barely present. I sat back in my chair. The glow of the screen illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air. He thought I was barely present. He thought I was distracted by grief and spreadsheets. He thought I was the quiet, grateful wife who would sign whatever piece of paper he put in front of her eye, because I was desperate to belong to his family. He was right about one thing. I was focused on work. But this was my work now. I took a screenshot of the thread. I forwarded it to a new secure email address I had created that morning. Then I forwarded a copy to June. I deleted the sent items from Graham's trash folder. I logged out. I closed the laptop. The room plunged into darkness. I picked up the wine glass. I drank it in one long, unladylike swallow. The alcohol burned, going down a sharp grounding sensation. "Okay, Dad," I whispered to the empty room. "I see the war now." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where Graham and I walked our dog, where we waved to neighbors, where we played house. It looked exactly the same as it had yesterday. But it was a facade, a stage set constructed over a sinkhole. My father had given me a weapon, Clause 4, a trap that would burn them to the ground if they stepped into it. All I had to do was be patient enough to let them. All I had to do was smile and cook dinner and sleep next to a man who had sold me for $500 and wait for them to hand me the match. Jun Yamamoto's office had transformed from a sanctuary into a war room. A whiteboard that usually held inspirational quotes was now covered in a timeline drawn in black marker. Emails I had forwarded were printed and spread across the conference table like a losing poker hand.
June stood by the window, her reading glasses pushed up into her silver streaked hair, looking less like an estate attorney and more like a general surveying a battlefield. She tapped a finger against a stack of papers. "They are planning something called a family agreement," she said. Her voice was clipped precise. "Do you know what that is, Nora? Some kind of contract that gives them access?" I asked.
They will likely present it as estate planning simplification. June turned to face me. She picked up a marker. They will use language like consolidating family assets or shared management for tax efficiency. It sounds boring. It sounds responsible. It is designed to make you feel petty for refusing it. And I am supposed to sign it. Under normal circumstances, signing it would be financial suicide. But here is the thing. She walked over to the trust document, which sat on the table like a holy text. Your father anticipated this exact maneuver. Clause 6 states that any agreement purporting to transfer trust benefits signed under conditions of documented pressure or familial coercion shall be void ab initio. So even if I did sign, I said, trying to follow the legal chess match, if we can prove pressure, it is worthless. June smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator watching prey walk into a clearing. If we prove pressure, we simply void the contract. We go back to square one. They try again. They find a new angle. That is the defensive play. I am interested in the offensive play. What is the offensive play? We let them commit forgery. The room went silent. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning unit and the distant wail of a siren in downtown Columbus. We let them get desperate. June continued, her voice lowering. We do not sign anything. We do not confront them. We let them believe you are simply indecisive or overwhelmed or stupid. We wait until they decide they cannot wait any longer. And when they submit a forged signature to the bank, Clause 4 triggers. Immediate exclusion, I whispered, remembering our last conversation. Total scorched earth. June leaned her hands on the table. But Nora, there is one thing I need to tell you. This plan requires patience, possibly months of it. Can you do that? Can you live in that house with him? Share a bed with him and pretend nothing is wrong while he plots against you? I thought about the email thread. I thought about the price of $500 for a notary. I have been pretending for 7 years. June, I said. I just didn't know it. A few more months won't kill me. This will end your marriage, she warned. There is no coming back from this. My marriage ended the night I heard him promising to steal my password. Strange how clarity feels like relief. There was no more wondering if I was paranoid, no more hoping I was wrong. There was just execution. The following Sunday, we were back at the Keller's house for dinner. The routine was nauseatingly familiar. The roast beef, the heavy red wine, the way Vivian presided over the table like a monarch. But I wasn't looking at Vivian tonight. I was looking at the empty chair at the end of the table where Len usually sat. Len, I said during a lull in the conversation about Paige's new interior design client, I have a terrible headache. Do you have any Tylenol? In my office? Len grunted, not looking up from his potatoes. Top left drawer, I excused myself. My heels clicked on the hardwood floor as I walked down the hallway. The family photos lining the walls seemed to watch me. Graham at graduation, Paige at her debutante ball, a family vacation to Hilton Head where everyone wore matching white linen. I wasn't in any of them. Len's home office smelled of stale cigars and old paper, a dry, dusty scent that stuck to the back of my throat. It was a room frozen in 1995. Heavy oak desk, green banker's lamp, a filing cabinet that looked like it belonged in a noir film. I opened the top left drawer. The Tylenol bottle was there, rattling next to a box of paper clips. I took 2 out and dry swallowed them just in case anyone checked the bottle level. Then I looked at the filing cabinet. I wasn't looking for painkillers. I was looking for a name. Hendricks. The drawers groaned when I pulled them open. Tax returns from 10 years ago. warranties for appliances they no longer owned. Len was a hoarder of paperwork. I flipped through the hanging folders, my fingers moving quickly. In the back of the bottom drawer, tucked behind a thick file labeled insurance, I found a manila folder. The label was handwritten in faded blue ink. Personal correspondence. I opened it. Inside were letters, old ones written on stationery that had yellowed with age. One caught my eye immediately. The return address was Cincinnati. The handwriting was jagged angry. Dear Len, I can't believe you are taking her side. After what Vivian did to me and Robert, I thought you would stand up for your own blood. But I see now that she owns you just as much as she owns that house. It was signed Dorothy Hendricks Keller, Len's sister. I had met her once at our wedding. She had sat in the back row, stayed for 20 minutes of the reception, and left without saying goodbye. I had assumed she was just eccentric. I pulled out the letter beneath it. It was dated October 14th, 1996. She convinced Robert that consolidating the properties was for the family good. She used those exact words, Len, for the family. And now Robert is dead, the properties are in her name, and I am living in a rental in Cincinnati. Do not tell me it was a misunderstanding. She planned this. She waited until he was sick. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty room. Vivian hadn't just invented this scheme for me. This was her playbook. She had done this before 28 years ago. She had done it to her own sister-in-law. She had waited for a death in the family, used the guise of consolidation and unity, and stripped a woman of her inheritance. And everyone just forgot, or pretended to. I heard footsteps in the hallway. I shoved the letter back into the folder, shoved the folder back into the drawer, and slid it shut just as the door handle turned. I turned around, leaning against the desk, my heart hammering against my ribs. Vivian stood in the doorway. She was holding a glass of wine. Her eyes swept over me, then moved to the filing cabinet, then back to my face. "Did you find the Tylenol, dear?" she asked. Her voice was warm, dripping with that terrifying manufactured concern. "I did, thank you," I said. I held up the bottle. "Good." She took a step into the room. "We were just worrying about you. You have been in here a long time. I just needed a moment of quiet," I said. "The headache." "Of course," she smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. It never did. That smile was a biological function, a baring of teeth that mimicked happiness. "Stress can do terrible things to the body, Nora. You really should let us help you carry the load." I looked at her. I saw the woman who had written emails plotting to steal from me while my father lay dying. I saw the woman who had destroyed Dorothy Hendricks. "I am feeling much better now," I said. I walked past her. I felt her gaze on my back, like a physical touch, cold and heavy. 2 weeks later, the war moved into my kitchen. It was Wednesday evening. I was chopping vegetables for a stir-fry, the knife hitting the wooden cutting board in a steady, rhythmic cadence. Chop, chop, chop. It was the only sound keeping me grounded. Graham was sitting at the island, his phone on the counter. He had put it on speaker mode, a habit I used to find annoying and now found strategically invaluable. Vivian's voice filled the room, bouncing off the stainless steel appliances. "Graham, it has been almost 2 months," she said. Her tone was sharp, lacking the honey coating she used in public. "We need that agreement signed." "I am working on it, Mom," Graham said. He sounded tired. He was rubbing his temples. "Working on it is not good enough. Paige found the notary. We are ready to move. We are losing momentum." "Dinner in 10 minutes," I called out, making my voice loud enough to carry. There was a pause on the line. Then Vivian's voice shifted instantly, pitching up an octave into sweetness. "Is that Nora?" "Tell her I said hello, Mom. I have to go," Graham said. He tapped the screen to end the call. He picked up his beer and took a long swallow. He watched me cook for a moment, the silence stretching between us like a tightrope. "Hey," he said. Can we talk about the trust I didn't stop chopping? What about it? Mom mentioned there might be some paperwork to streamline things, make it easier to manage. Streamline, I repeated. Yeah, like a family agreement, just something that says we are all on the same page. So we can all access the accounts if something happens to you. I put the knife down. I turned to look at him. If something happens to me. God forbid, Graham added quickly. But planning ahead, it is just smart. I looked at my husband. He was wearing the blue polo shirt I had bought him for his birthday. He looked like the man I had married. But beneath that familiar exterior was a creature entirely motivated by debt and fear. He wasn't worried about my safety. He was worried about the repayment clause on a promissory note hidden in his desk drawer. I will think about it, I said. My voice was even. He exhaled a sound of relief. Okay. That is good. I will tell her you are open to it. I turned back to the vegetables. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I gave him the gray rock. After dinner, while Graham was in the shower, I sat in the living room with my laptop. Willa had set up a mirroring application for me. It allowed me to see exactly what was happening on Graham's phone, as long as we were on the same Wi-Fi network. A text message notification popped up on my screen. Sent to Vivian. She said she will think about it. I think I made progress. I watched the 3 dots dance as Vivian typed her reply. From Vivian, not good enough. Apply more pressure. I stared at the words glowing on my screen. Apply more pressure. I imagined Vivian sitting in her satin robe typing those words with manicured fingers. She thought she was the puppet master. She thought she was pulling strings that would make me dance. She didn't know I could see the strings. I closed the laptop gently. I could hear the water running in the shower upstairs, washing away the sweat of the day, but not the stain of what he was doing. Please. I thought, a cold smile touching my lips for the first time in weeks. Apply all the pressure you want. Every text, every threat, every coerced conversation is just another brick in the wall I am building around you. You are not fighting a war, Vivian. You are documenting your own conspiracy. And I am saving every receipt. The conference room at Deloitte was a glass box suspended in the center of the 24th floor. The blinds were drawn, slicing the afternoon sun into thin, dusty ribbons on the carpet. The air conditioning hummed with that specific, aggressive silence, found only in corporate offices, a sound that usually meant serious money was being discussed. Today, the currency was my marriage. Willa stood by the projector screen, her laptop connected via a tangle of cables. She wasn't holding a smoothie today. She was holding a laser pointer, and she looked like a surgeon preparing to deliver a terminal diagnosis. Okay, she said. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. I ran the metadata analysis you asked for. I pulled the logs from your home network and cross-referenced them with the email headers you forwarded. What? Show me, I said. I was sitting at the head of the long mahogany table, my hands pressed flat against the cool wood to keep them from trembling. Willa clicked a button. A spreadsheet filled the wall rows of data glowing in high contrast. First, the auto-forwarding rule, Willa said, pointing to a highlighted row. Someone logged into your personal email account and set up a rule to forward all incoming messages to vivian.keller.home@gmail.com. I looked at the date stamp. August 15th. That was 2 weeks before he died, I said. My voice was hollow. Dad was still in hospice. He was still conscious. They didn't wait for him to die, Willa said gently. They set up the pipeline while he was still breathing. She clicked again. The screen changed. Now the password changed. You said you didn't change it, but the logs show a reset request on August 27th at 11:47 at night. I closed my eyes. 11:47. The exact minute I stood outside the bathroom door in the dark, listening to Graham promise his mother he would get access. He hadn't just been talking about it. He had been doing it while I stood 10 feet away. The device ID for the reset traces back to a MacBook Pro, Willa continued. Specifically, one named GK_100 work_laptop. Graham's work laptop. And there is one more thing Willa said. She hesitated, looking at me with an expression that broke my heart. It was pity. Pure, unadulterated pity. I dug deeper into the browser history on that device. It syncs with his phone. I found search queries from July. July, I repeated. Search terms included Ohio inheritance laws, spousal rights, contesting a trust, and how to override beneficiary designation. I stared at the screen. The data was cold, binary, indisputable. My husband hadn't just stumbled into a bad decision because his mother pressured him. He had been researching how to rob me for months. Nora Willa said, her voice soft. This is bad. This is divorce lawyer bad. This is call the police bad. I know, I said. What are you going to do? I stood up. I smoothed the front of my skirt. I walked over to the window and looked out at the Columbus skyline, the buildings standing tall and rigid against the gray sky. I am going to let them think they are winning, I said. Just a little longer. You are scaring me, Willa said. Good, I replied, watching my reflection in the glass. I am scaring myself too. Cincinnati in October was a study in grayscale. The sky was the color of wet concrete, and the rain that had followed me down Interstate 71 was relentless, a steady drumbeat against the windshield of my car. I parked outside a small coffee shop in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. It wasn't the kind of place Vivian would ever set foot in. There were no white tablecloths, no fresh flowers, just worn leather boots and the smell of roasted beans and damp wool. I was 20 minutes early. I sat in a booth facing the door watching the street. When Dorothy Hendricks walked in, I knew her instantly. Not because she looked like Len, she didn't, but because she looked like a woman who had spent half her life looking over her shoulder. She was 72, wearing a sensible beige cardigan and rain boots. She paused in the doorway, shaking out a wet umbrella, scanning the room with eyes that were sharp and suspicious. When her gaze landed on me, she froze. For a second, I thought she would turn around and walk back out into the rain. Then she squared her shoulders and walked toward me. She didn't hug me. She didn't smile. She slid into the booth opposite me and wrapped her hands around the warm mug of black coffee the waitress set down without asking. You found my letter to Len, she said. It wasn't a question. I found it in his filing cabinet, I said. In the back of a drawer. I am surprised he kept it, Dorothy said. She gave a short, bitter laugh. I am surprised he remembers I exist. I leaned forward. What happened, Dorothy, with Vivian? She took a long sip of coffee. She looked out the window at the rain slicking the pavement. What always happens with Vivian? She finds something she wants, and she convinces herself she deserves it. She turned her gaze back to me. My father-in-law, Robert's father, owned 3 rental properties in Cleveland. Nothing fancy, but they were paid off. Steady income. When he died, his will left one to Len, one to Robert, and one to me. I nodded, encouraging her to continue. Vivian found out, Dorothy said. She couldn't stand it. She couldn't stand that I had something she didn't control. She started working on Len, then she started working on Robert. She told them that managing 3 separate properties was inefficient. She used that word over and over. Inefficient. She talks about streamlining, I said. Consolidating assets. Dorothy's eyes widened slightly. The playbook hasn't changed. She convinced Robert that we should sign a management agreement, just to centralize the billing, she said. She had a lawyer draw it up. It looked standard. Robert begged me to sign it. He said Vivian was just trying to help the family. I felt a phantom pressure on my own chest, the weight of Graham asking me to let him help. I signed it, Dorothy whispered. Within 2 years, the LLC she formed had absorbed the titles. There were clauses in the fine print about majority control. Since Len and Robert voted with her, they voted to sell my property to cover management debts that she had manufactured. I lost it all. She didn't just steal the money, I realized. She stole your inheritance. She stole my father's legacy, Dorothy corrected me. And Robert died 18 months later. Heart attack. The stress killed him. She killed him as surely as if she had put a gun to his chest. She reached across the table and gripped my hand. Her skin was dry, her fingers strong. She is doing it to you, isn't she? The inheritance. She is trying, I said. Don't sign anything, Dorothy hissed. Her intensity was frightening. Even if it looks innocent. Even if Graham begs you. Even if she cries and talks about family unity. She is a shark, Nora. She doesn't have family. She has food. I won't sign, I said. I didn't think I would either, Dorothy said, pulling her hand back. You seem smart. Smarter than I was. But Vivian is patient. She will wait years for the right moment to strike. She will wear you down until you say yes just to make the noise stop. I am not going to just say no, Dorothy. I am going to stop her. She looked at me, really looked at me, assessing. The set of my jaw, the coldness in my eyes. How I have a plan, but I need evidence of her pattern. Would you be willing to document what happened in writing? Notarized after 28 years, she asked. It is not about the statute of limitations, I said. It is about proving a pattern of behavior. It shows intent. Dorothy looked down at her coffee cup. She traced the rim with her finger. Robert would have wanted me to fight back. I never did. I just ran away to Cincinnati and hid. She looked up. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. Maybe it is time I stopped hiding, she said. She reached into her purse and pulled out a pen. What do you need me to write? The house was empty when I got back on Monday. Graham was at work selling medical devices to people who trusted him. I walked into his home office. It was a masculine space filled with framed photos of him playing golf and a humidor he never used. I went straight to the bottom drawer of his desk. It was locked. Graham thought a lock was security. He didn't realize it was just a delay. I didn't have a key, but I didn't need one. I knew where he kept the spare taped to the underside of the bookshelf, a trick he had used since high school. He was a creature of habit, and his habits were lazy. I retrieved the small silver key and slid it into the lock. The mechanism clicked open with a satisfying thunk. I pulled the drawer open. Hanging files, car lease, insurance, taxes. I flipped past them. I was looking for the things he didn't file. In the back, beneath a stack of old check registers, was a blue folder. No label. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a formal bank document. It was typed on plain paper, looking almost amateurish, but the signatures at the bottom were unmistakably real. Promissory note. Principal amount $180,000. Date March 15th, 2019. Borrower Graham L. Keller. Lender Vivian A. Keller. My eyes scanned the text. For value received, borrower promises to pay to lender the principal sum above upon demand or upon the occurrence of family estate distribution. I read it again. Family estate distribution. And there in handwriting, I recognized immediately a note in the margin. To be repaid from N's trust share. I sat down on the floor. The carpet was rough against my legs. March 15th, 2019. We had been married for 2 years then. That was the year he tried to open the restaurant. The year it failed. He had told me his mother helped out with the closing costs. He had never told me it was a loan, and he certainly hadn't told me that my future inheritance was the collateral. He had sold me 3 years before my father even got sick. I looked at the signatures. Graham's sprawling scrawl, Vivian's tight, spiky cursive, and a witness signature. Paige E. Keller. They were all in on it. The whole pack of them, sitting around my dinner table drinking my wine, asking about my day, all while holding a lien on a fortune I didn't even have yet. I wasn't a wife. I was an investment vehicle. I was a bond that was finally maturing. I took my phone out and photographed the document. I took close-ups of the date, the amount, the signatures, then I put the paper back in the folder back in the drawer and locked it. I taped the key back under the bookshelf. I walked into our bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed we shared. I looked at the indent in the pillow where his head had rested last night. $180,000. That was the price. If he had asked me back then, I might have helped him. If he had been honest about the debt, I would have worked with him to pay it off. We could have done it. We were partners, but he didn't want a partner. He wanted a payout. I touched the jade pendant. It felt heavy today, like a stone that was ready to be thrown. He owed Vivian $180,000, but he owed me everything, and I was going to collect. The living room of the Keller estate was staged like a set for a play about a happy, functional family. Fresh hydrangeas sat in the center of the coffee table, their blue heads bobbing slightly under the force of the ceiling fan. A silver pot of coffee gleamed next to a stack of bone china cups. Vivian had arranged the seating in a circle, a formation that was meant to suggest equality but felt more like a tribunal. I sat in the wingback chair, my hands folded in my lap. I was wearing the navy blouse Graham liked, the one that made me look professional but soft. I was playing the role of the daughter-in-law who was just happy to be included. Vivian poured coffee. Her hand was steady. She handed a cup to Len, who took it without looking up from the carpet, then one to Graham, and finally one to me. Nora, we wanted to discuss something as a family, Vivian began. She sat down, crossing her legs at the ankle. About Howard's trust. I took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter. Of course, we have all been talking, she continued. Her eyes sweeping over Graham and Paige, implicating them in the conspiracy with a single look. And we think it would be best if the assets were managed collectively, for tax purposes. Collectively, I repeated. The word tasted flat. It makes sense, honey, Graham said. He was leaning forward, elbows on his knees, trying to look earnest. It streamlines everything. If we pool the resources with the family estate, we get into a higher bracket for investment returns. Better yield. Vivian reached for a navy blue folder on the table. She slid it across the glass surface. It stopped inches from my hand. We have prepared a simple agreement, she said. Just formalizing that we will all have input on major decisions. Nothing draconian, just family. Taking care of family. I looked at the cover sheet. Family Asset Management Agreement. It looked legitimate. Heavy bond paper, legal formatting. I opened it. 8 pages of dense single-space text. I pretended to read. I furrowed my brow, tracing a line with my finger. I didn't need to read it. I had already seen the draft. Willa had intercepted it from the corrupt notary's email server 3 days ago. I knew exactly what was buried in Clause 7. This is very thorough, I said, turning a page. We want to do this right, Vivian said. Her voice was soothing, hypnotic. We want you to feel supported, Nora. You have been carrying so much alone. I looked up. I met her eyes. They were wide blue and utterly vacant of empathy. I will need my lawyer to review it, I said. The silence that followed was sharp. Graham shifted in his seat. Paige looked at her mother. Vivian's smile froze. Just for a second, the muscles around her mouth twitched. We are family, Nora. Why bring lawyers into it? Lawyers just complicate things. They bill by the hour to create problems that do not exist. Because it is $3.2 million, Vivian, I said softly. I am sure you understand, and I closed the folder. I placed my hand on top of it. I will have June look at it next week, I said. I waited for the explosion. I waited for the guilt trip, the tears, the speech about how I was being difficult, how I didn't trust them, how I was ungrateful after everything she had done for me. But it didn't come. Well, Vivian said. She stood up and smoothed her skirt. That sounds reasonable. You have her look at it. We just want what is best for you. She turned to the sideboard. Who wants cake? I sat there, my hand still on the folder. My heart rate kicked up a notch. She gave up too easily. Vivian was a bulldog. She didn't let go when she clamped down. If she was letting go of the rope, it was only because she had already found a different way to hang me with it. Monday morning, June. Yamamoto's office felt like the only safe place in Columbus. Sunlight streamed in through the blinds, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. June was sitting behind her desk, the family asset management agreement dissected in front of her. She had used a red pen to circle paragraphs, and the document looked like it was bleeding. "This document is a masterpiece," June said. She sounded almost impressed. "Good fraud or bad fraud?" I asked. I was sitting in the client chair drinking tea that actually tasted like tea. "Terrible fraud," June said. "Amateur hour. Listen to this. Clause 7 alone would let them drain the entire trust into a designated family management account. Who controls the account? A committee of 3, June read. Decisions require a simple majority. Vivian Graham and Len, I guessed. June nodded. But here is the kicker. Len's signature authority is delegated to Vivian in the event of his incapacity, or, and I love this part, his absence. So if Len goes to the bathroom, Vivian controls 2 votes. So she controls the money. Exactly. But that is just theft. Here's the beautiful part. June flipped to page 4. She tapped the paper with her pen. They included language about successor beneficiary designation. I leaned forward. What does that mean? It means that if you sign this, you are agreeing to let the committee designate who inherits your share if something happens to you. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. They are planning to cut me out. If you had an accident, June said. She made air quotes with her fingers. I am not saying they would do that. I am saying this document would let them keep the money if you did. It removes the trust's default setting, which would send the money to charity or a blood relative. It redirects it to the committee, to Vivian. To Vivian, June confirmed. I sat back. I felt a strange, giddy sensation in my chest. It wasn't fear. It was vindication. But I didn't sign, I said. No, you didn't. And now we have this, I said, gesturing to the red-inked pages. We have the document. We have the emails. We have the IOU from Graham's desk. We have Dorothy's testimony. It is over, isn't it? I asked. We beat them. June looked at me. She didn't smile. She took off her reading glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Not quite, she said. What do you mean? We have evidence of intent, June said. We can prove they wanted to defraud you. We can prove they planned it. But for the trap to spring for Clause 4 to trigger the total disinheritance, they need to actually commit the fraud. They need to submit a forged document to a financial institution. But I said no, I argued. I told them my lawyer needed to review it. They know I am watching. Won't they just give up? Nora, June said softly. Vivian does not give up. She does not pivot. She doubles down. I thought about the dinner. The cake. The way she had smiled and accepted my refusal. We need to be ready, June said. Ready for what? For her to find another way. June leaned forward, her eyes searching mine. Nora, I need to ask you something. Have you noticed anything strange at home? Strange how documents moving, files accessed, anything that suggests they are not waiting for your signature. I shook my head. No, I keep my office locked. Graham doesn't have a key. Are you sure? I paused. I was sure. I was the one who managed the house. I was the one who hired the locksmith when we moved in. But then I remembered something. The family meeting. We were in the living room for an hour, maybe 90 minutes. Halfway through, Graham had stood up. I'll get more coffee, he had said. The pot is empty. He was gone for 20 minutes. When he came back, he didn't have coffee. He said he had started a fresh pot and it was brewing. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. I have to go, I said. I drove home with the radio off. The silence in the car was suffocating. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. He was gone for 20 minutes. It takes 3 minutes to brew a pot of coffee. What was he doing for the other 17 when I pulled into the driveway? The house looked normal. The blinds were open. The porch light was off. It was just a house. I unlocked the front door. The air inside was stale. Graham was still at work. I dropped my purse on the kitchen counter and walked straight to my office. The door was locked. I pulled my keys out. I slid the small brass key into the knob. It turned smoothly. I pushed the door open. At first glance, everything looked exactly as I had left it. My laptop was on the desk. The stack of tax journals was on the shelf. The filing cabinet in the corner was closed. I walked over to the cabinet. I knelt down. I always turned the lock to the 3 o'clock position. Vertical. It was a habit, a tiny compulsion I had developed years ago. The lock was at 1 o'clock. It was slight. If you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't see it. But I was looking. I inserted the key. I turned it. I pulled the top drawer open. This was where I kept the trust documents. The originals were in a safe deposit box, but I kept a working copy here. 23 pages stapled in the top left corner. I pulled the file out. It felt lighter. I opened it. The pages were there. I flipped through them. Page 1, page 2, page 3. I stopped at page 23, the signature page. My signature was there. Nora L. Keller, in blue ink. But there was a faint gray line running horizontally across the bottom of the page. A toner mark. I ran my thumb over the signature. It was smooth. No indentation. No pressure mark from a pen. It was a photocopy. I grabbed the page and held it up to the light. The paper grain was slightly different. Brighter white. Copier paper, not the heavy bond of the original document. They hadn't just looked at it. They had taken it apart. They had removed the signature page. They had copied it. And then they had put it back, hoping I wouldn't notice. I felt the bile rise in my throat. They weren't waiting for me to sign the family agreement. They never were. That meeting was a distraction. It was a magic trick. Look at the left hand holding the scary contract while the right hand picks the lock to your office. Graham. My husband, the man who had vowed to protect me. He had used the time while I was being interrogated by his mother to break into my office and steal my name. I heard the garage door rumble open. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. He was home. I shoved the file back into the folder. I shoved the folder back into the drawer. I locked it, turning the mechanism carefully to the 3 o'clock position. I stood up. I smoothed my blouse. I forced my breathing to slow down. I walked out of the office and pulled the door shut just as the door from the garage opened. Graham walked in. He was holding a plastic bag that smelled of basil and coconut milk. "Hey," he said, smiling. "You are home early." I froze in the hallway. I looked at him. He looked so normal. He looked like a husband bringing home dinner. "How did it go with June?" he asked, kicking off his shoes. "Fine," I said. My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else. "She is reviewing the document." "Good," Graham said. He walked past me toward the kitchen. "I hope she doesn't complicate things." "She won't," I said to his back. He set the bag on the counter. "I ordered Thai," he said. "Pad see ew for you, extra spicy." He turned and kissed my cheek. His lips were warm. "Be ready in 20, he said. "I am going to change." He walked past me, whistling a tune I didn't recognize. He walked down the hall, past the office he had broken into, past the wife he was planning to rob, and into the bedroom. I stood in the kitchen. The smell of Thai food was nauseating. He had copied my signature. He had photographed it, which meant they weren't just thinking about forgery. They were practicing. They were training for it. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My fingers were shaking so hard I mistyped the passcode twice. I opened my secure text app. I typed a message to June. They copied my signature. They have the source material. 3 dots appeared instantly. "June, don't panic. This is what we planned for." "Clause 4, I typed back. "What if it is already done? What if they didn't wait?" The dots danced for a long time. "June, then we find out, and we spring the trap. I put the phone down. I could hear Graham upstairs opening drawers, moving around with the careless confidence of a man who thinks he has gotten away with it. They hadn't waited for permission. They had taken what they wanted. And somewhere on a desk in Vivian's house or in a file at a bank, there was a document with my name on it that I had never touched. I looked at the Thai food. I wasn't hungry. I was ready. The smell of roasting turkey and pumpkin spice candles was thick enough to choke on. It was Thanksgiving in the Keller household, a performance of domestic perfection that Vivian had directed for 40 years. The dining table was a landscape of crystal and china, centered around a bird that looked like it had been painted for a magazine cover. Vivian was in her element. She moved around the table, filling wine glasses, her laugh a little too loud, her movements a little too expansive. She was wearing a new silk scarf, a Hermes print I recognized from a catalog, and diamond stud earrings I had never seen before. She was spending the money already. She thought the forgery had worked. She thought the silence from the bank meant acceptance. "I am so glad we could all be together," Vivian said, raising her glass. "Family is what matters most, especially after such a difficult year." "Cheers to that," Graham said. He clinked his glass against mine. He smiled at me, a wide, easy smile that didn't show a trace of the man who had practiced forging my signature 50 times in a notebook. Paige was picking at the stuffing. "Mom, this turkey is amazing! Seriously!" Vivian beamed. She looked at me. "You seem relaxed, dear. That is nice to see. You have been so tense lately." I took a sip of water. "I have made peace with some things I said." "Haven't we all?" Vivian said. She reached out and squeezed my shoulder. Her grip was tight, possessive. Underneath the chatter, the clinking silverware, and the holiday playlist, the air in the room was vibrating with anticipation. They were waiting. They were waiting for the official notification that the funds had been transferred. They were waiting for me to be none the wiser until it was too late. Midway through dessert, Vivian stood up. "I just need to check on something in the kitchen," she said. I waited 30 seconds. Then I stood up. "I need to make a quick call," I said. "Excuse me." I walked into the hallway. The kitchen door was pushed almost shut, but not clicked. I stood in the shadow of the grandfather clock listening. Vivian's voice was low urgent. "Yes, I am trying to access the Chen Trust account. I have the authorization code right here. Let me check." There was a pause. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. "What do you mean silent hold?" Vivian's voice pitched up, losing its cultivated warmth. "What hold? We filed the papers last week. I am a successor beneficiary." Another pause. Longer this time. "There must be a mistake," she hissed. "You need to check again. I am authorizing a transfer of $50,000 to the management account. Why is it declining?" I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the expression of a trap snapping shut. I walked back into the living room and sat down next to Graham. I took a bite of my pumpkin pie. It tasted like victory. 5 minutes later, Vivian appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale, the blush standing out in stark, artificial patches on her cheeks. "Nora," she said. Her voice was brittle. "Can I speak with you in private?" "Of course," I said. We walked into the kitchen. Vivian closed the door behind us, leaning against it as if to block my escape. The room was too bright after the dim dining room, the fluorescent under-cabinet lights reflecting off the stainless steel appliances. "Did you do something to the trust accounts?" she asked. Her hands were shaking. "What makes you ask?" I said. "Don't play games with me, Nora. I just tried to make a transfer. It was blocked." I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. "I am not the one who plays games, Vivian." "I don't know what you think you know," she began, her eyes narrowing. "I know you forged my signature on a beneficiary designation change form," I said. My voice was calm, steady, quiet. "I know you filed it on November 15th. I know you used a corrupt notary named James Wexler who charges $500 cash. I know Paige practiced my signature 30 times on a legal pad because I have the photos from Graham's iCloud backup. Vivian's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like a fish pulled onto a dock. That is ridiculous, she stammered. I have the metadata, Vivian. I have the copier logs from my home office. I have the email thread where you told Graham to get my password while my father was dying in hospice. She started to cry. It was instantaneous, a weaponized burst of tears. You don't understand, she sobbed, stepping toward me. We were trying to protect you. All that money all alone. You don't know how to handle it. Family should help family. Stop, I said. After everything I have done for you, she wailed. I treated you like a daughter. You did nothing for me, I said. You did everything for yourself through me. You treated me like an asset to be liquidated. How dare you? She hissed. The tears vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. Dorothy Hendricks, I said. The name hit her like a physical blow. She flinched, stepping back against the door. 28 years ago, you did the same thing to her, I continued. Same playbook, same family agreement. You convinced Len and Robert to consolidate the properties, and she lost everything. She is living in a rental in Cincinnati because of you. That was different, Vivian whispered. It was identical, I said. But this time, there is one difference. What? This time, the trust was designed by someone who knew exactly who you were. The door behind Vivian pushed open. Graham walked in, looking confused. Paige was right behind him. What is going on? Graham asked. Mom, are you crying? Your mother just found out the accounts are frozen, I said. What? Graham looked from me to Vivian. Why? Because you forged my signature, Graham, I said, turning my gaze to him. On November 15th, while I was at June's office, you broke into my locked file cabinet, copied the signature page, and then ordered Thai food. I don't know what you are talking about, Graham said, his face flushing red. Donna said, I have the photos from your phone. I have the promissory note from your desk drawer. Graham went silent. Paige put her hand over her mouth. What is happening? Paige asked, her voice small. What is happening is that you all just triggered Clause 4 of my father's trust, I said. Vivian wiped her face. What does that mean? It means that the attempted forgery was reported to the Ohio Attorney General's office 3 days ago, I said. The bank flagged it. They called me to verify. I told them it was fake. You told them, Graham whispered. I did, and they placed a silent hold on the account. They told me that if any party named in the fraudulent document attempted to access the funds, the secondary provision would trigger. I looked at Vivian. You just tried to transfer $50,000, Vivian. You attempted access after fraud was detected. So Vivian asked, her voice trembling. So the trust converts, I said. Entirely. It transfers to the charity of my choice. You are permanently excluded. All of you. You will never see a penny of the Chen family money. Not now. Not ever. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. The hum of the refrigerator seemed deafening. Graham took a step toward me. Nora, please what I asked. Please give you another chance. Please let you steal from me again. I love you, he said. He looked desperate, pathetic. You owed your mother $180,000, I said. That is not love, Graham. That is a transaction. He stopped. He looked at Vivian, then back at me. He knew that I knew. The leverage he had over me, the illusion of our marriage, was gone. You can't do this, Vivian whispered. I didn't do anything, I said. You did. All I did was not warn you. I reached for my left hand. I twisted the diamond band off my finger. It felt heavy cold. I placed it on the granite counter. It made a sharp click. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce, I said. My forensic team will be available for the criminal investigation regarding the forgery. I walked toward the door. Vivian didn't move. She stared at the ring on the counter as if it were a bomb. If you walk out that door, Vivian shouted, her voice cracking, You will have no one. I stopped. I turned back to look at them. The three of them, frozen in their nice clothes, in their nice kitchen, trapped in the wreckage of their own greed. What will you do? I asked softly. What can you do? You forged my signature. You stole my password. You planned this for months. And now? I smiled. It was the first real smile I had felt in months. Now you have nothing. I walked out. I walked through the dining room, past the uneaten turkey and the crystal glasses. I walked out the front door into the cold November air. Behind me from the kitchen I heard a sound. It wasn't a word. It was a scream. A raw, primal sound of total devastation. I didn't look back. The highway was a ribbon of darkness under the streetlights. I drove with the radio off, listening to the hum of the tires on the asphalt. My hands were steady on the wheel. For the first time in months, the shaking had stopped. My phone rang through the car's Bluetooth. It was June. It triggered, she asked. No hello, no preamble. Vivian tried to access the accounts, I said, about 20 minutes ago. So the trust converts, June said. To the Chen Family Foundation, I confirmed, supporting first-generation college students. Your father would be proud, June said. Her voice was thick with emotion. I hope so, I said. What about Graham? I left my ring on the counter. There was a long pause. Are you okay? June asked. No, I said. I watched the city lights blur past. But I will be. I hung up. The silence returned, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt spacious. I touched the jade pendant at my throat. This stone shows what is real. What was real was that I had been married to a lie. What was real was that they had tried to strip me of everything my father built. What was real was that I had stopped them. I felt clean, like I had walked through a fire and burned away everything that wasn't me. That was enough. 6 months later, the Ohio spring had finally broken the winter's back. The Forest Lawn Cemetery was a riot of green, the dogwood trees exploding in clouds of white and pink blossoms. I walked through the grass, my heels sinking slightly into the earth. It was the same walk I had made in August, but the woman walking it was different. I was wearing a yellow sundress. I had cut my hair a sharp bob that swung against my jawline. I looked like someone who lived in the sunlight, not the shadows. I knelt by the gray granite headstone. I placed a bouquet of fresh white chrysanthemums in the vase. The divorce was finalized last month, I said to the stone. Graham tried to contest it, but the forgery evidence complicated things for him. His lawyer told him to sign the papers and be grateful I wasn't pressing harder for jail time. I pulled a weed from the base of the stone. Vivian is facing charges, I continued. Page 2. Len stayed out of it mostly. He claimed ignorance. It was probably the smartest thing he has ever done. A bird chirped from the oak tree above me. The foundation is up and running, I said. The first scholarship went out this week. A girl from Youngstown. She wants to be an engineer. She is the first in her family to go to college. I touched the cold stone, tracing the characters of my father's name. You would have liked her dad. She reminds me of me. Before I got scared. I stood up. I looked around the quiet cemetery. For a long time, I thought this was where things ended. Now I knew it was where things began. I had sold the house. I had split the proceeds, giving Graham exactly half down to the penny. I wanted nothing that belonged to us. I bought a small condo downtown with big windows and a view of the river. It was mine. The deed had one name on it. I checked my phone. A text from Willa. Brunch. That new place with the waffles. I typed back. Yes. 11. I looked at the headstone one last time. I am okay. Dad, I whispered. Finally. The wind rustled through the trees, scattering a few white petals across the grass. Thanks for the fortress, I said. I turned and walked back toward the car. The sun was warm on my face. The jade pendant bounced lightly against my collarbone, bright green alive. Marriage didn't give them rights to me. Blood didn't give them rights to me. Nothing gave anyone rights to me. Except me. I unlocked my car. I got in. I drove toward the city, toward brunch, toward a Sunday that belonged entirely to Nora Lynn Keller. New day, new life, mine. The moon cast a rectangle of pale light across the duvet, bisecting the bed, into zones of light and shadow. I sat in the wingback chair by the window, my legs tucked beneath me, watching the rise and fall of my husband's chest. 3 a.m. The witching hour. The time when the integrity of the daylight world dissolves and you are left with nothing but the truth you have been avoiding. Graham slept on his side, one hand tucked under the pillow. His face was relaxed, the tension lines around his mouth smoothed out by sleep. He looked like the man I had met at a coffee shop 7 years ago. He looked like the man who had held my hand during the funeral, passing me tissues without being asked. He looked innocent, but innocence was just a lack of evidence, and I had a filing cabinet full of proof. I looked at the digital clock glowing red in the darkness. In a few hours, the sun would rise. In a few hours, the bank would open. In a few hours, the phone would ring. I closed my eyes and let the memories scroll through my mind, a film reel playing in reverse. Our wedding day. The way he cried when he saw me in my dress. The way we toasted to us against the world. Then the reel jumped back further. 2 years into our marriage. March 15th, 2019. The day he signed a promissory note to his mother for $180,000. The day he collateralized our future. I had spent the last week agonizing over whether our marriage had ever been real. Had he loved me? Or had he just been waiting for the payout? Looking at him now, I realized it didn't matter. Maybe he did love me in his own weak, compromised way. Maybe he told himself he was doing this for us. That was the most dangerous lie of all, the idea that betrayal could be a form of service. I touched the jade pendant at my throat. It was warm against my skin. This stone shows what is real. What was real was the email thread where he offered to steal my password. What was real was the practice signatures in his cloud storage. What was real was the forgery filed with the bank. I could wake him up. I could shake him by the shoulders and scream at him. I could tell him I knew everything. I could drag him to the phone and force him to withdraw the document. I could save him from the ruin that was barreling toward him. That would be the merciful thing to do. That would be the wifely thing to do. But I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was a target, and he wasn't just a husband. He was an accomplice. If I warned him, he would stop. He would lawyer up. He would hide the evidence. He would find a way to spin it, to gaslight me, to make himself the victim. I only did it because we needed the money, Nora. I only did it because you were being difficult. And then 5 years from now, or 10, he would try again. My father had built a fortress to keep me safe. Who was I to open the gates just because the invader had a nice smile? I stood up. My legs were stiff. I walked to the side of the bed. I looked down at him for a long time. I memorized the curve of his eyelashes, the scatter of gray hairs at his temple. I was grieving him while he was still alive. I loved you, I whispered. The words were barely a breath too soft to wake him. That was real. He shifted in his sleep, mumbling something unintelligible, and turned his back to me. I turned my back to him. I walked out of the bedroom, closing the door with a click that sounded like the final beat of a heart. The envelope sitting on June's desk was cream-colored and heavy. My name was written on the front in handwriting that made my throat close up. It was shaky, the lines slightly uneven, written by a hand that was losing its strength, but not its resolve. For Nora. If you are reading this, I was right, and I am sorry. June sat across from me, her hands folded on the desk. She didn't say anything. She just waited. I was instructed to give you this only if the trust was ever challenged. Fraudulently, she said softly. He wrote it 3 days before he died. I picked up the envelope. My fingers trembled as I broke the wax seal. I pulled out the single sheet of paper. My dear Nora, if you are reading this, someone has tried to take what I left you. I suspected it might happen. That is why I built this trust the way I did. I knew my death would leave a vacuum, and I knew who would try to fill it. I want you to know something, and I need you to hear me clearly. You are not cruel for letting the trap spring. You are not heartless for refusing to warn people who planned to steal from you. You spent your whole life being careful, being good, being quiet. You learned that from me, and for that I am sorry. I taught you that silence meant safety. I was wrong. Sometimes safety means showing teeth. Justice is not the same as cruelty. Consequences are not the same as revenge. Do not let them make you feel guilty for protecting yourself. I love you. I believe in you. Spring the trap, Dad. A tear fell onto the paper, blurring the ink on the word teeth. I hadn't cried when I found the emails. I hadn't cried when I saw the forgery. I had been too cold, too focused on survival. But reading his words, hearing his voice from beyond the grave, giving me permission to fight back, something inside me broke open. He knew. He knew exactly who I was. He knew I would struggle with the guilt. He knew I would try to find a way to be the good girl, the peacemaker. Safety means showing teeth. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. I placed it in my purse next to the jade pendant. June pushed a box of tissues toward me. I took one and dabbed at my eyes. "What do you want to do?" she asked. I took a deep breath. The air in the office felt cleaner, sharper. "I want to finish what he started," I said. The phone on June's desk rang at 2:14 in the afternoon. It was a sharp, demanding trill that cut through the silence of the room. June looked at the caller ID, then she looked at me. She pressed the speaker button. "This is June Yamamoto," she said. "Miss Yamamoto, this is David Thorne from the Trust Administration Department at Chase Bank. I have Mrs. Nora Keller listed as the primary beneficiary and contact for the Chen Family Irrevocable Trust." "Is she available?" "She is here," June said. "Miss Keller." Thorne's voice was professional, detached. "We are calling to verify a document received by our office on November 15th. A beneficiary designation change form." I leaned toward the phone. "I am listening. Did you sign this document, Ms. Keller?" The room seemed to tilt. This was it. The moment of no return. If I said yes, I saved my marriage. I saved Graham from prison. I saved Vivian from ruin. I would spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next knife, but they would be safe. If I said no, I thought of the practice signatures. I thought of the IOU. I thought of my father's letter. ID means showing teeth. "No," I said. My voice was clear. I did not sign that document. There was a pause on the line, the sound of typing. "You are stating for the record that the signature on this document is not yours?" Thorne asked. "That is correct," I said. "The signature is a forgery." "Thank you, Miss Keller," Thorne said. His tone shifted, becoming more formal, heavier. "Under the terms of the Chen Family Irrevocable Trust, specifically, Clause 4, a report of forgery triggers a mandatory protocol. We are required to notify the Ohio Attorney General's office immediately. We are also placing a hard hold on all trust accounts pending a full investigation." "I understand," I said. Ms. Keller Thorne continued. "There is a secondary provision in the trust bylaws regarding notification. If any party named in the fraudulent document attempts to access trust funds before the investigation concludes, the trust converts to charitable distribution. Do you want us to notify the named parties? Graham Keller, Vivian Keller, and Paige Keller of the hold, and the fraud report?" June looked at me. Her eyes were intense. This was the second choice, the lethal one. If I told him to notify them, they would know they were caught. They would stop. They would lawyer up. The trap would snap shut on their fingers, but their heads would remain attached. If I told him not to notify them, they would think the forgery had worked. They would try to access the money. And in doing so, they would trigger the permanent exclusion. They would lose everything. I thought about Vivian's smile. I thought about her telling me family should share burdens. I thought about her destroying Dorothy Hendricks 28 years ago because no one stopped her. I wasn't doing this to be cruel. I was doing it to be sure. Do not notify them, I said. Are you sure? Thorne asked. I am sure. Let the account sit on a silent hold. Understood, Thorne said. We will proceed with the silent hold. If any attempt is made to access the funds, the full provisions of Clause 4 will activate immediately. Thank you, Ms. Keller. The line clicked dead. The silence that filled the room was heavy, vibrating with the energy of a guillotine blade that had been hoisted to the top of the frame. It is done, June said quietly. Now we wait, I said. They will try to access it, June said. Vivian won't be able to resist. She has been waiting months for this. She thinks she has won. I know, I said. I looked out the window at the gray winter sky. I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. It wasn't happiness. It was the feeling of a storm finally breaking. Vivian would try to take the money. It was in her nature. A shark couldn't stop swimming, and a thief couldn't stop taking. She would walk into the bank or log in online expecting to see millions, and instead, she would find a mirror reflecting her own greed. And when she did, it would be over. Not because I destroyed her, but because she destroyed herself. Vivian was wearing a new Hermes scarf. That was the tell. She poured wine with a heavy hand, her laugh bouncing off the crystal glasses, filling the dining room with the sound of premature victory. She thought the silence from the bank was acceptance. She didn't know it was a holding cell. I sat next to Graham eating turkey that tasted like sawdust waiting for the trap to spring. It happened over dessert. Vivian slipped into the kitchen, claiming she needed to check the coffee. 30 seconds later, I heard the hiss of a whisper, turning into a frantic shriek. Declined. What do you mean declined? I am a successor beneficiary. I walked in. She was clutching her phone like a lifeline, her face drained of color. Graham followed me, looking confused. Paige hovered in the doorway. I didn't let them breathe. I didn't let them spin a new lie. I know you forged my signature on November 15th, I said. My voice was quiet, cutting through the panic. I know about the corrupt notary. I have the metadata from the copier and the photos of the practice signatures from Graham's cloud backup. Vivian gasped, dropping the phone. Graham went pale. And because you just attempted to access the funds after a fraud report was filed, I continued. You triggered Clause 4. The trust has converted to charity. You are permanently excluded. Graham reached for me. Nora, please. We were desperate. You were greedy, I said. You owed your mother money, Graham. You didn't love me. You leveraged me. I twisted my diamond band off my finger. I placed it on the granite counter. It made a sharp final click. My lawyer will contact you, I said. I walked out the front door into the cold November air. Behind me, the silence broke into the sound of Vivian screaming. 6 months later, the dogwoods were blooming at Forest Lawn. The air smelled of damp earth and new life. I placed fresh white chrysanthemums on my father's grave. The divorce was final. The Chen Family Foundation had issued its first scholarship. I had a small condo downtown with a view of the river and a deed that held only one name. I touched the jade pendant at my throat. It felt warm against my skin. I am okay, Dad, I whispered. Finally. I turned and walked back to my car, the sun warming my face. I wasn't just safe anymore. I was free. We are often taught that silence is passive, that if we are not fighting or explaining, we are losing. But Nora's story proves that silence can be your most devastating weapon. By waiting, by observing, and by letting people reveal their true nature, she didn't just win an argument, she secured her freedom. You might not be facing a multi-million-dollar conspiracy, but you likely face daily pressures to ignore your intuition for the sake of keeping the peace. When you feel that friction, when words don't match actions, when generosity feels like a transaction, pay attention. Do not rush to fix it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stand back and let the truth reveal itself. Real power isn't about controlling others, it is about having the discipline to protect yourself. Is there a situation in your life right now where you are working too hard to justify someone else's bad behavior? What would happen if you stopped explaining and just watched what they did next?